Hello, Mr. Dre, back with another video. And in this one, what we're going to be taking a look at is adding and subtracting decimals, which once you remember to do one very simple but very important thing, it will be just as easy as adding and subtracting whole numbers. But we have to make sure that we remember to do one very simple thing, okay? And that simple thing has to do with our place value system, right? What we have to do is we have to make sure that we're adding ones with the ones and tenths with the tenths, hundreds with the hundreds, and thousands with the thousands, right? And one of the reasons I have this here is this decimal right here, that's what lets us know where the tenths is, where the hundredths is, and so on. So this decimal tells us, once we see where the decimal is, we know, well, right next to it's the ones. Right next to it on the decimal side is the tenths. So that decimal is the most important thing when we're adding and subtracting decimals, right? So we're gonna do one example of addition, one example of subtraction, and then we're also gonna show you the wrong way to do it, some common mistakes. So hopefully you'll be all ready to go. All right, so the first one, I'm just gonna make up some numbers here. We're gonna do 34, and 6/10, and we're gonna add that to 2 and let's say 3,500, sorry. So when you're out in the real world and you have a problem that you have to figure out, whether it's at the grocery store or wherever, the real world doesn't set the problem up for you, right? You have to, through problem solving and things like that, you have to set the problem up yourself. So normally, unless you can do it in your head with mental math, we don't set up addition and subtraction horizontally, we set it up vertically. So I'm gonna rewrite this problem, 34 and 6/10. Now, before I even write the 2 and 3,500ths, the thing I'm gonna do is what we talked about over here, the decimal being the most important thing. I'm going to write the decimal down first. And what that allows me to do is, first of all, make sure my decimals are lined up. Second, once the decimals are lined up, everything else, in terms of the digits, in terms of place value, has to be lined up also. So lining up those decimals is the most important thing, because once you do that, every other place value will be lined up. Now look, 2 ones is being added to 4 ones. 6/10 is being added to 3/10, and so on. Everything's lined up because of that decimal. Another little trick that you can do that is helpful is to, before you start adding and subtracting, just drop this decimal straight down in your answer, and now you can just ignore the decimals. You're pretty much done. All you have to do is add. A lot of times you're gonna see things like this that look a little weird. There's gonna be a missing digit here. If that bothers you, I could just go ahead and add 5 plus nothing is 5. But if that bothers you, you can always put a little 0 here, right? Because we know that 6/10 is the same as 60/100. If that bothers you, you can put a 0 there, kind of like as a placeholder, but it's not necessary, right? 6 plus 3 is 9, 4 plus 2 is 6, and then of course 3 plus nothing is 3, so our answer 36 and 95/100. Now, I'm gonna show you the wrong way to do it, and I'm gonna make sure I put wrong down here, so if somebody's watching this video and skips ahead to this part, they'll know that this is not the way to do it. Some people see 3 digits in this problem and 3 digits in this problem, and look what they do. They just line up the digits like we normally do with whole numbers. But once you set this up, you see a few issues here. One, there are 2 decimals. So in your answer, where would the decimal go, right? There's one here and one way over here. Second, this number right here, this 3, that's worth 30. This 2 should only be worth 2 because it's 2 and. This 2 is supposed to be in the ones place, but now you're adding it to a tens. So if I were to add this, I'd get something and put the decimal here, I would have something like 50, almost 60, right? One thing you should always do before you're adding and subtracting or any type of problem is, before you start it, whether you're working on the calculator or first in math or wherever, you should always look, well, what should my answer be, right? Make a little estimate in your head. And I know 34 and 6/10, that's kind of like 35. 2 and 3,500ths, that's kind of like 2. So I know 35 plus 2 should be about 37. Look where my answer was, very close to 37, not 50. right? So this, I know, would not make sense. So we line up decimals, not digits. So do not line up digits, line up decimals. All right, let's now look at subtraction. Same idea, except this time I'm gonna throw a little bit of a curveball here. I'm gonna do 11 minus 4 and 6/10. So 11 minus 4 and 6/10. Now you might say, wait a minute, when you go to set this up, 11 does not have a decimal. So this is a whole number minus a decimal. What do I do? Well, every single whole number, the numbers that you learned in pre-K or in kindergarten, every single whole number has an imaginary decimal here. Has an imaginary decimal right there, okay? And then I can just fill in, since I only need one place value to tenths in the 4.6, I can just add my 0 there. You might say, well, why is that? Well, you already know this. If you go to like McDonald's or somewhere like that with a dollar menu, sometimes on the menu, it will just show that, right? $1. And you know that's $1. But then in other places, you might see $1 and it looks like this. And you know that's $1 too. So right there, when you're thinking about money, sometimes it's just $1, and then sometimes it shows a decimal and no cents, and you know that's $1 too. So that proves that every single whole number has this imaginary decimal here. And I could add 1 0, I could add a million zeros, whatever I need, right? In this case, I only need 1. And now I'm gonna subtract 4 and 6/10, but before I write 4 and 6/10, I'm gonna drop my decimal down, and that's gonna ensure that the 6/10 goes with the 0/10, and it's gonna ensure that in the ones place, my 4 is located, right? And now, same thing as before, I'm gonna drop my decimal down before I do any work. You cannot do 0 minus 6, so I'm gonna borrow 10 from next door. This would be an 11, so I'm gonna make it a 0. I'm gonna add 10 here, and I made this a 0 because you can't do 1 minus 4 or 0 minus 4, so we're gonna make this now a 10, and we borrow from this 1, all right? So quick little thing on some borrowing. 10 minus 6 is 4, 10 minus 4 is 6, nothing over here. Our answer is 6 and 4/10. And just to kind of continue this here, to show you the wrong way to do it, right? The wrong way to do it. Down here, if I were to just line up digits, you would see how wrong this would be, right? Because now you're taking 4, let me just zoom out a little bit. Now you're taking 4 ones away from 110, and that's not, you're making this 4 a 40, right? And that just doesn't make sense. So we do not line up digits, we line up decimals, right? Line up the decimals like we did up here. That's the way we do it, all right? So adding and subtracting decimals, all you have to remember to do is line up the decimals, and lining up the decimals isn't important. What's important is that all the place values are lined up. And if you line up the decimal, everything has to be lined up that way, all right? One other trick, if you're practicing these at home, is to, I have some example problems here. If you hold your notebook sideways, like in these problems here, you can use the lines in your notebook as place value columns, right? You just gotta make sure that the digits go inside of the blue lines, and if you put the decimal right on the line, it will help keep your work nice and organized, especially if your handwriting isn't the neatest in math. If you kind of rush through your work and everything gets kind of different sizes and slanted and all stuff like that, you can hold your notebook sideways as a quick little trick to help you keep your place values in order and in line. All right, so we hope this was helpful. Adding and subtracting decimals. Remember to line up those decimals, keep your place values together, and we will catch you on the next one. Thank you for watching.